Hello and welcome to Talking Live. I'm Dr. Robi Ludwig right here in Star Shop Studio in Times Square. And I am so excited to have Linda Fairstein here. She is a former sex crime prosecutor. She did that job for over 2 decades. And then she segued into an international bestseller for crime novels, adult crime novels. And most recently, she has now come out with a middle school target aged group for her latest of Devlin Quick Mysteries. It is so fabulous, and it is based on, I think, originally your love of Nancy Drew.
Totally.
So I read somewhere, Linda, that you wanted to be a writer when you were in 6th grade.
First, I have to say, Dr. Robi, it's
Yes.
so great to see you and be with you again.
The pleasure's mine. I have a picture because we really go back. We knew each other in the Court TV days,
That's
also
right.
the Today Show. I have a picture. That's a beautiful picture of you, by the way. That's from your prosecution days. And you haven't aged. I mean, you really look the same. So God bless. Whatever you're doing, share your secrets with our audience. But I have a picture of Nancy Grace and my uncle. And I really did not know until today that you met my uncle at some event, but that's just a beautiful picture as well.
Wonderful. He was always great and is always great. It was great to me. So happy connections.
Yes, I promised my friend, one of my girlfriends, who actually is a public defender and wanted to be a novelist, she said, please ask Linda for me, how did she make that shift? Because a lot of lawyers, their identity is surrounding being a lawyer.
Yes.
And you made that shift successfully. What's your secret? How'd you do it?
Well, I think you started to say, when I was growing up, all I wanted to do was write. And I really discovered it with the Nancy Drew books. I loved series. I loved that feeling of waiting for the same characters to come back. You felt like you knew them. You knew her friends. You wanted to be in the blue roadster. You wanted to know her boyfriend. So I had this dream to write. And my father, whom I adored, was very loving, but he used to say, you have nothing to write about. Get a career. Nicely.
Really?
Yes. So he wasn't entirely wrong. I went to law school, had a great career as a prosecutor, but I never gave up the dream. And that's a good thing for your friend and people. If you have any desire to do something like write, just keep at it. I mean, as lawyers, one of our skills is hopefully being good storytellers. I mean, when you're a public defender, like a prosecutor, you're in front of a jury trying to convince them. I mean, the difference between that and fiction is you have to use real facts in the courtroom, whereas the stories just let your imagination go wild. But I started to write novels while I was still prosecuting. And then I stepped away after 30 years, and it's what I devote myself to now. And it was, I pinched myself, the dream I had as a kid that has been fulfilled.
Did you ever take classes, or really the law, writing for the law was your training ground?
Well, I was an English lit major in college. So I really...
Linda went to Vassar, by the way, in case you were wondering.
When it was all girls. But I went there really for the purpose. There have been so many great writers, Mary McCarthy, Elizabeth Bishop, the poet, Edna St. Vincent Millay, the poet. And I took a lot of writing classes when I was there, creative writing and just papers for everything connected to literature. So writing was something I liked. And some people hate it. I can't tell you the number of people who come up to me at a conference and ask questions and then say, you know, I don't really like to write, but I'd love to be John Grisham. You know, you have to like it because John Grisham didn't get there by, you know, clicking a magic wand.
So I wonder what they really want. That's what I would say as a therapist. If you don't like writing and you want to be a novelist, what do you really want?
Well, Dr.
Maybe
Robi,
something else.
You hit it. They want the bestseller at the end of it, and they want the pot of gold if there is one at the end of the rainbow, and they want, I think, some of them, you know, the name recognition. And so I tell them, you know, that's not going to happen to many writers. There are not a lot of Grishams and Pattersons and Michael Connellys and Lisa Scottolinis. You know, you have to want to do it. But I think a lot of careers lend themselves more to it. So a lot of lawyers could make that transition if it's at all what they want to do.
We're going to get into this series, but I just want to also mention that you have your 20th book coming out with your Alexandra, right? It's Cooper. That's your adult mystery series, and you're coming out with your 20. And also, you're in 12 different languages. What do you think is the ingredient to your success?
Well, I think that people love mysteries and crime stories, and there are whole seminars and conferences where writers discuss why. There are people who say they like the crimes to happen in fiction so that the good detective can restore, you would know, Doctor, the moral order to the universe and put it back together so everything ends well. People like to know the motives behind why someone would do something bad. And so when I started, I mean, the Brits have the really background in this. I mean, from Sherlock Holmes, Agatha Christie, there's a golden age, they call it, of crime in British literature. And then there are French mysteries, Maigret, Inspector Maigret. I think there are 100 of those books. And then we were hit a few years ago. Most of your watchers, viewers will know the girl with the dragon tattoo. There became this Scandinavian flood of books. So it seems to be a very popular theme all over the world.
And it's exciting too, I think, because we do want to know why, and because crime is real, and so it's safer to read about it and be excited and horrified when on some level you know it's not real, but it could be real.
Exactly. And and when people, you know, lock their doors at night, they're afraid of everything else, and they'll get into bed with one of these mysteries. I think, you know, double lock the door because your fear level does go up. You're supposed to be page turning and not putting it down and be a little bit frightened by
it's a real gift to write in that way. It really is. Now, this Devlin quick mystery series, Secrets from the Deep, is coming out tomorrow, so we will definitely have a link. What inspired you? Because Devlin is very charismatic. She's kind of older than her years. She has a best friend. She's curious. What inspired you for this particular novel?
So it goes back to my love for Nancy Drew, who, when I was middle grade, Nancy Drew was 16. And I thought she was bold and daring and was out in her crime-filled little town of River Heights or whatever, solving you know, crime after crime after crime. So when I created Devlin, my character, she's 12. She's New York City. She's very edgy, fun, spunky New York. Much younger than Nancy was. She doesn't drive, obviously, at 12 and in New York, so she uses the subway. She's got a best friend, Booker, and the thing that I really wanted to do, Doctor, you will figure out my motive. Her mother is the first woman police commissioner of New York City, a job I dearly wanted in the 1980s. And so that gives Devlin, you know, a background where every night at the dinner table, her mother who's a single mom, you know, they talk about what happened during the day and how to make people safe. But Devlin knows if she wants to get a fingerprint record on someone or learn more about DNA, she can get into police headquarters, 1PP, as we call it in New York, One Police Plaza. And the cops call it the Puzzle Palace. And she loves the Puzzle Palace because it helps her figure out these crimes, which are not violent, but usually this one happens on a beach on Martha's Vineyard. And
that's where you live. So you use the places that you live, Martha's Vineyard and New York City, as the backdrop and even a character, really, in your novel.
Yes. I love to make the places come alive. And of course, it could be anywhere, but if you have a vacation place, if you go to a beach, this is supposed to remind you of your beach, because the ordinary, going to the beach in the morning, there's a new science experiment. There actually is DNA that comes off fish scales in the water. So you could take a scoop of water in the morning and a DNA lab could tell you there was a tuna in that water or a bluefish. These kids see a shark because it is New England and there are sharks. And then scooping up, they find a piece of pirate treasure, a doubloon. And I had no idea till I did my research that pirates, who I always think of Pirates of the Caribbean,
Yeah.
actually used to leave the Caribbean after they'd, pillage the British and Spanish ships, and they would hide their treasures along the New England coast. So there really are hidden pieces of gold.
Wow.
And so it's the ordinary beach day that just becomes this extraordinary puzzle.
Now, how did you get into the mindset of a 12-year-old or this middle school age group? Because I wouldn't even know the first thing about how to reach them or what's interesting to them. And I have kids, and I still wouldn't know how to do it.
Well, that was the hardest part. And I have to say, in the publishing business, the editor, when I presented this, was very worried about my ability to channel a 12-year-old and speak. As you know, the language is a big part of it. So a lot of it's being around family and friends with kids. I read a lot of other fiction in this group.
Okay.
I went back, sadly, to read a lot of my Nancy Drews, but they're from such another period that the language wouldn't work at all.
Yeah.
And Nancy, if you think of the covers of every book, going out in her skirts and her little heels, her little pumps, and solving crimes. This is jeans and sneakers and loafers.
And do they have cell phones, or are they too young for cell phones as 12-year-olds?
Very good. So at the moment, Devlin has been too young for cell phones, which solves a lot of problems because you can get out of trouble so easily. If something's going wrong, kid, mom, come get me. So it's great to not have them be allowed yet to have cell phones.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that opens up the possibilities a lot more for you, right? Especially if someone who doesn't have access to help. How has your younger audience felt about or reacted to this book when you're out on tour?
So it's great fun for me because I'm so used to doing signings where adults come at night. They're not afraid to, there's no fear of asking any questions about why you write and why did you do this and when are you going to do more of this and when is your character going to get together and hook up with the male detective. Kids are just interesting in an entirely different way. The tours usually are some bookstores, but always schools. And educators want you to come in and talk to the kids. And here's where the kids have no filter. I mean, they'll ask your age, you'll ask how much money you make when you write a book.
Are you serious?
They'll go totally.
Oh my God.
Off. I was born before the first one.
That's hilarious.
And yes, and so is the kid who says.
Are those just New York children?
No,
or are they
this
anywhere?
was a warning to me. I think it was the first time I was in Chicago. And another author said to me, you're used to, at least the adults are polite when they ask questions. They may ask
Googling how much you made.
Yes, exactly. They do it another way.
I won't ask her, but I'll know ahead of time.
They do it another way. Absolutely right. So, and then there's the kid audience in the school. There are the kids who like to read.
Yeah.
And they're very responsive, and maybe they sit down in front on the floor. And then you get the kids who don't like to read.
Yeah.
So as adults, they don't have to come to your signing. These kids have to come to the fourth grade signing. So it's very, very different. But kids love the signed book. They like to be part of. I sometimes do puzzles. My book has a map in the front so the kids can follow along with where the treasure was and where the other clues are around the island. So it's an entirely different set. And I studied kind of how to do it in hopes of getting it right. And someone once said, I think the worst thing someone once said to me was, well, do you just dumb down the adult books? Can you imagine? And these, kids who are readers
probably
are
a lot of people think that.
And
so
a lot
it was
do.
a good question in a way.
In a way, and just so entirely wrong. Because the kids who like to read and who are good readers,
probably the smart ones,
are so
right.
And
they're the smart ones.
They're smart, and they ask, well, why didn't you do that? And I think, okay, maybe in the next book I'll do that.
Yeah.
They've got good ideas. A lot of them bring their own stories. And I did one school in Connecticut where we sat around and had a session where each kid read kind of a 3-paragraph beginning to a story, and we critiqued the stories, and then they critiqued mine. but it's fun. It's just fun with kids.
Yeah, because they are unedited, so you know what you're getting, and you walk away with more information. I imagine for your books. And is it different writing, because this is the third in your series?
Yes.
So there were two other books. How do you write differently for the third book in a series, and keep your old readers' attention and capture new readers?
Good question. And it's the same with adult books. Once you have a series and the characters come back, there's something called a backstory. You need the new reader to be told enough about Devlin and her best friend that they're up to speed, and can follow the story and get right into the story. But if you read the two other books, you don't want to hear a 5-page biography of Devlin Quick. They want to get right into it too. So I learned from my first editor 20 books ago, when I wrote my second crime novel for adults. She sort of explained to me, too heavy-handed, too much of this. This is important for them to know. And then you kind of layer it in throughout the story. If something happens and it's happened to Devlin before, you'll explain why she knows she can get into police headquarters, and how her mother's number 2 guy, will cut corners and skip the ID process and let her come in. So trial and error is part of the way, and having a good editor, which I am lucky to have,
That's
is great.
always key.
Yes.
Whenever you're writing, a lot of it is imagination and talent, but good editing for sure.
Oh my gosh.
How is Devlin similar to Nancy Drew? Are there similarities?
I would say, that's a really good question. So they both have this boldness and physical courage that I did not have as a middle grade kid. I often get the question, how much is Devlin like you? She does things that I would never have dared to do. I mean, if my mother said, don't cross the street and go to the other side of the road unless somebody's with you, come on, Booker, we're going to find this guy, and I know how to take the 4, 5, and 6 train, and we'll get there. So I would say, like Nancy Drew, they're very intrepid. They undertake things. They both have a sense of justice. They want to do the right thing. Devlin wants to know whose piece of treasured coin this was. If it was lost 300 years ago, that's one thing. But if somebody owned it and dropped it on the beach, dropped it getting into a boat, she wants to restore it to the right person, the way Nancy Drew wanted to find the secret in the old clock and make it right. So they are alike in that way. I would say that Devlin is a little, fresh is maybe the wrong word. I don't want
cheeky?
Parents not cheeky. Yes, she's cheeky. And they're both very loyal to their friends. Nancy had Bess and George, and then the boyfriend Ned. And Devlin's got Booker first, and Katie, and her friend Liza from Argentina. So and now, of course, FaceTime, she can Skype her friend in Argentina to say, this dinosaur in the last book, was found in Patagonia. Tell me about Patagonia. So there's all kinds of new devices that, of course, you have to keep up with the kids.
Yeah.
But there are those similarities, and then Devlin is edgier.
We're going to segue a little bit to some of the things that you're doing now, but I just want to say that your series has been described as super fast-paced, clever, and loads of fun, and the modern-day Nancy Drew, which is really exciting. And again, we're going to have a link, and you are speaking at Barnes & Noble on 86th Street as well. So tomorrow, people can find you and actually hear directly
after
from
they
you.
Vote, they can come
After they vote, they can then talk about it with Linda and hear all about the latest novel. I want to talk about the Preppie Murder case and trial, and you're going to be sharing things on today's show that you have not shared with anyone yet.
That's right.
You prosecuted that case in the 80s.
Yes.
This was a case that I was riveted by, in part because they were around my age. I related to the people, both the killer and the victim. They both could have been friends of mine. They looked like people I knew.
Yes.
And I remember just hearing the story and thinking, this guy's so good looking and so dangerous, and this poor girl. And they made mincemeat out of her. Any thoughts, fast forward, and I know you're working on a movie, which I want you to tell us about.
Sure. So the murder happened in 1986, and the resonance it still has today has been remarkable to me. It's a long time later. You said a couple of things that are so telling. Robert Chambers was, by most people's standards, a very good-looking guy.
We have a picture of him there. That was back in the day.
That was back in the day. 6'4", standing in front of the courthouse. Very well bred. Always, dressed to look like that in court. And that face got him places he would never have been able to go. He was basically, since the age of 14, he was 19 when he killed his friend, Jennifer Levin, with his bare hands, and she was 18. And he'd been addicted to drugs, serious drugs, since he was 14, thrown out of school after school, been in rehab. Jennifer didn't do drugs. She would, when they ran into each other, try and convince him not to do it.
Now, did they date? They dated for like a
minute. They
Okay.
were in kind of revolving circles of friends. Everybody knew everybody else. They had gone out together sort of 2 nights, weeks apart. And the night that she died, August 26th of 1986, they ran into each other at Dorian's, which was then, and stunningly is still now, a very popular bar on Manhattan's Upper East Side on 2nd Avenue. And the group got smaller and smaller. And Jennifer was she's very vibrant, very happy. She was going off to college, to start college a week later. Rob had just gotten out of Hazelden rehab. He was kind of at the bottom of the barrel because he had dropped out of the rehab and come home, was still abusing drugs. And he was supposed to meet another girl there that night. And what happened was Jennifer saw him, was excited to see him, ran over to him. He got mad at her because he was waiting for another date.
Oh, wow.
So they argued. The other girl, who went on to become an actress, an actor on television, named Alex Kapp, got very mad at him and walked out. And I think he stayed angry at Jennifer. He stayed at the bar. They left together around 3 a.m. And 3 hours later, her very broken and bruised body was found in Central Park by a young woman riding her bike at 6:20 in the morning, and saw what she thought was first a homeless woman leaning against a tree, and then got off her bike because there was no movement, and realized again that it was a dead young woman.
He was clearly so sociopathic and so damaged early on. Do you think he killed her because he was just so enraged and it was displaced?
So you would have a better idea than I. I mean, one of the problems before the jury was we never had the exact motive. And we don't have to, as prosecutors, prove motive to a jury, but they like it. It's human nature. You want to know why somebody does something this dramatic and deadly. So as best we could tell, he was angry that night. He was doing a lot of drugs. Jennifer was not. But we had people in the men's room who gave him drugs and saw what he was doing. And they left and they walked to the park. And all that we know was that they argued about something. We don't know what it was, but it appears there was an argument. And we know this because there were sort of 3 areas in the park of interest. One would be your chair, let's say, where they went and sat down and started to talk and perhaps started overtures of a sexual nature. I think the fight began there. The second disturbance was very close to the museum, Metropolitan Museum of Art, the roadway, and I think Jennifer was trying to get away from him because she could sense his rage, and he overtook her there. Her body was found, say, where my seat is, and it was staged to look like a sexual assault. There had actually not been any completed sexual act, but her clothing was in disarray. There was nothing that had DNA in it. And when you talk about sociopathic, to me, one of the most horrible things about it was the biker found the bike. Again, we're talking no cell phone days. So she had to go out to Fifth Avenue to find a phone booth and call 911. And other passersby began to stop people jogging and riding bikes and walking dogs in the morning, as they do in the park. And we have a witness who saw and talked to Robert Chambers. So he sat on the wall behind the Metropolitan Museum and watched while his friend's body was found.
Oh, God.
And then he went home and went to sleep. Never came forward and said there's been an accident, something terrible happened. And believe me, it was not an accident, but you would think he
probably
might.
didn't care.
Yes.
Now you are doing a movie. You're the executive producer?
Yes.
Tell me.
So a very good friend of mine, Bobby Friedman, who's runs something called Bungalow Entertainment, came to me and said, you know, the story's really never been told, not in a tabloid way. And he sold the idea to Sundance Television, which obviously is a respectable outlet. And we got together the original detective, Mike Sheehan, Jennifer's mother, Ellen Levin, a lot of her friends, other detectives who worked on the case. And the movie is being filmed right as we speak.
Very exciting.
Yes.
Very exciting. And they taped you in your apartment, right?
First in my apartment, and then Detective Sheehan and I walked the whole crime scene in Central Park to show literally the way things happened, where evidence was found, and how we think it was resolved.
I don't think anyone really knew that there was no sex. I think the presumption of sex. So
that's what everybody thought. And of course, since I was a sex crimes prosecutor,
yes,
everybody assumes that it was either a rape or an attempted rape, but there's absolutely no evidence that it ever got that far.
Well, I hope the true story gets out and resonates with people and is experienced differently in this Me Too environment.
Yes.
When does the movie come out?
The movie will be out in the spring, probably
Okay,
April.
so hopefully you'll come back.
Yes.
We're going to do a quick 5.
Okay.
Because you're so fascinating. I could just talk to you for hours.
Thank you,
Okay,
Dr. Robi.
what's a holiday that doesn't exist that you'd like to create?
Ooh, I'd say International Mystery Day.
Oh, I love that. Great.
And have conferences and you know, fake crimes and solve them.
That's next for you, Linda.
Okay.
If you could have unlimited storage of one thing, what would it be?
Oh, books. I maybe jewelry too.
Yes, yes, I'm there with you on the jewelry.
I'm looking at you.
Yes,
that made me
I
think
know.
of it.
I'm addicted. It's sad. What are the qualities you really enjoy in a friend?
Sense of humor, I think, really trumps everything else, and loyalty. I think those are the two things. Give me that in a friend, and we're locked.
Two great qualities. If you could read minds, how would you use this gift?
Oh, I think it would be crime stopping.
Yeah.
I think if I could, you know, and that was a big problem with Robert Chambers. People wanted to be around him because he was good looking and cool. And, you know, I would love the ability to stop bad things from happening.
Right. Because
by
he's
reading
probably
the
thinking,
minds.
I'd like to kill you.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, people are like,
he
wow,
was in
he's so
court.
cute.
He was in court, and you know, he'd do this. He'd hold the door open for me and do all these things that he was well bred
Manipulative.
to do. Manipulative. Thank you, doctor. And so that the journalists would see him doing it. Oh, what a good guy! And maybe this was an accident. And I was thinking, he'd like to take that door and slam me.
That's right. Yeah, thank God he didn't. If you could make a rule for a day and everyone had to follow it, what would it be?
Be nice.
Yeah, be
It
nice.
would just be.
And buy your
There's
book.
so much.
And buy your book.
Kind of,
and we're going to have a
that's
link
a good rule.
so you can find out more about Secrets from the Deep. It's fantastic. The crime series is just very impressive, as is Linda. Thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
I adore you. It's been way too long.
Absolutely.
And just excited that our audience could hear from you and hear the latest news that you haven't shared about, you know, with anyone. Big secret, Robert Chambers. So more on that in the spring. We're looking forward to it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next